Welcome back, explorers of the bizarre and curious, to explore and discover Curious World. Today, we're taking a trip back in time, way back to when our human ancestors had no idea what Wi-Fi was, never ordered coffee at a bar, and the word influencer didn't even exist. But wait, maybe influencers did exist, only they were called Neanderthals. Yes, today we're talking about these fascinating prehistoric cousins, and spoiler alert, by the end of this video, you might discover that a small part of you is, in fact, Neanderthal. But before we dive into the depths of DNA and fossilized bones, I have one small request. Have you subscribed to the channel yet? No? Come on, what are you waiting for? Here we talk about everything that's strange, fascinating, and let's be honest, fun to discover. So click that red button and join the community of Curious World explorers. Now that you've clicked, let's start. Prepare your mind, because we're about to plunge into the Ice Age, into a world where survival didn't depend on your credit card balance, but on how well you could wield a club. The story of the Neanderthals. Who exactly were the Neanderthals? Imagine a world completely different from ours. Cold, hostile, and full of gigantic animals like mammoths and woolly rhinos. In this setting, Neanderthals were the true heroes of the Stone Age, living in Europe and Asia for a whopping 350,000 years. They dominated the land for an incredibly long time, far longer than we Homo sapiens can boast, at least so far. But don't think they were just cavemen who were dumb and primitive. Neanderthals were far more advanced than we might imagine. They developed tools, hunted in organized groups, and demonstrated incredible resilience. Imagine having to survive a glacial winter with nothing but animal skins and a fire made with stones. We complain about heating bills, but Neanderthals had real survival issues. Now, you might wonder, if they were so clever, why did they disappear? Well, here's where the mystery begins. No one knows exactly what happened to the Neanderthals. It could have been the climate, which became too harsh even for them. It could have been competition with our ancestors, Homo sapiens, who were busy developing new technologies and survival strategies. It could even be a combination of small misfortunes that accumulated and led to their eventual demise. And yet, they didn't completely disappear. A part of them is still with us, and I'm not talking about the bones archaeologists dig up at prehistoric sites. I'm talking about something much more intimate: DNA. That's right, a small part of your DNA might be Neanderthal, and that opens up a world of questions. What did we inherit from them? What physical or behavioral traits might come from those distant cousins? We'll get to that soon. The mystery of Neanderthal DNA. After thousands of years of wondering who the Neanderthals really were and why they disappeared, modern science has finally given us some answers. In 2010, a team of geneticists sequenced the Neanderthal genome for the first time, using DNA fragments extracted from bones found in various sites in Europe. And the discovery was astonishing. Modern humans, especially those of European and Asian descent, carry between 1% and 3% Neanderthal DNA. But what exactly does that mean? Well, first of all, it doesn't mean we're all half cavemen. It means that when Homo sapiens left Africa about 60,000 years ago and began exploring Europe and Asia, they encountered the Neanderthals. And during those encounters, let's say, cultural exchanges happened. In other words, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals intermingled, and from this mingling came the genetic mix we carry with us today. This small fragment of Neanderthal DNA could influence several aspects of our lives. For example, some studies suggest that Neanderthal DNA played a role in developing our immune system. Not only that, but there are also theories that certain physical traits, such as the shape of the nose, may have been inherited from Neanderthals. Think about it. That prominent nose you see in the mirror every morning might be a prehistoric gift, a kind of genetic souvenir we've been carrying for tens of thousands of years. And it's not just the nose. Neanderthals lived in a harsh world where survival depended on the ability to adapt to extreme climatic conditions. So, it's possible that some of our physical characteristics, such as resistance to cold or the ability to store fat, are also a legacy of these ancient cousins. Another interesting curiosity is that, despite Neanderthals never having lived in Africa, some modern African populations also carry traces of their DNA. How is that possible? Well, scientists believe that the first Homo sapiens encountered Neanderthals in Europe and then returned to Africa, bringing that small genetic fragment with them. So yes, Even though you thought Neanderthals were limited to Europe, they actually left their mark much further south. Neanderthal legacy, physical and cognitive aspects. Now, let's talk about what Neanderthals left us in terms of physical and cognitive heritage. We've already touched on the nose, but there's much more. Scientists have discovered that Neanderthals had physical characteristics well adapted to the environment they lived in. They were robust, with short and muscular limbs, perfect for withstanding the cold and hunting large animals. This body structure might explain why, even today, some people have a more stocky build, perhaps inheriting the strength needed to survive in extreme conditions. But it's not just the body. The Neanderthal brain is also a fascinating subject. They had a large brain, in some cases larger than ours. However, brain size isn't everything. Neanderthals had a different neuronal organization, which might explain why, despite their physical and social abilities, they didn't develop advanced technologies like Homo sapiens did. One intriguing theory suggests that the Neanderthal brain was more oriented towards sensory perception and short-term memory, while the Homo sapiens brain evolved to favor abstract thinking and complex language. This small difference could have been crucial for the survival and evolution of our species. But beware, having more neurons doesn't necessarily mean being more intelligent, so let's not overestimate our intelligence compared to Neanderthals. Neanderthals' social and family life. We can't talk about Neanderthals without mentioning their social life. Contrary to the stereotypical image of the solitary caveman, Neanderthals were social creatures. They lived in tight-knit family groups, in communities that supported each other, kind of like our modern family Sunday dinners, only with more fur and less Wi-Fi. Studies on Neanderthal remains suggest that these groups were very close and helped each other with everything from hunting to caring for the sick and elderly. In fact, some Neanderthal bones show signs of diseases or healed injuries, indicating they were cared for by their companions, kind of like when we bring soup to a sick friend today. This tells us that, despite their rough appearance and tough lives, Neanderthals had a strong sense of community and compassion. Another interesting discovery is that adult Neanderthal women often left the group they were born into to join another clan. This system of interfamily exchange strengthened social bonds and allowed different groups to survive better in a hostile environment. So, imagine the scene. A young Neanderthal packs her few belongings, probably a club and a mammoth hide, and sets off to start a new life with a new family. Yes, kind of like a prehistoric version of moving for love. And don't forget the hunting. Neanderthals were extraordinary hunters, able to coordinate in groups to take down massive prey like mammoths, woolly rhinos, and even cave bears. It's as if they were the first stars of a survival reality show. Who can hunt the mammoth before winter? And yes, there were no cameras, but the action was real, and the stakes were survival. The disappearance of the Neanderthals, mystery or defeat. Now comes one of the most fascinating and mysterious parts, the disappearance of the Neanderthals. After being on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years, about 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals suddenly vanished. But how is it possible that such a resilient, adaptable, and socially advanced species simply disappeared? This is one of the great mysteries of human history, and there are several theories. One of the most accepted theories is that Neanderthals couldn't compete with Homo sapiens, who, by that time, had developed new technologies, new hunting strategies, and a greater ability to adapt to a constantly changing environment. We could say that while the Neanderthals were still stuck using stone tools, Homo sapiens had already discovered the prehistoric Bluetooth. In short, technology played a decisive role, but some also believe that climate change played a fundamental role in their extinction. During the Ice Age, environmental conditions became extremely difficult, and the Neanderthals, who were used to cold climates, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the subsequent climatic changes. On the other hand, our Homo sapiens ancestors seemed to find ways to thrive, perhaps thanks to their superior cognitive abilities and social organization. Another fascinating aspect is the possibility that Neanderthals didn't disappear completely, but were simply absorbed by our species. As we've seen, there's a certain percentage of Neanderthal DNA that lives in us, which means that, in a sense, they never really disappeared. Perhaps the fusion between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals was more peaceful than we think, a sort of genetic alliance that allowed our species to inherit some of Neanderthals' best traits. And yet, a big question remains. If they'd had more time, could Neanderthals have developed a civilization as advanced as ours? Would they have built cities, invented electricity, or maybe posted selfies on a prehistoric version of Instagram? We'll never know for sure, but it's interesting to reflect on how small changes in evolution can make the difference between success and extinction. So, what can we learn from our Neanderthal cousins? Well, first of all, that they were much more like us than we ever imagined. They lived, loved, hunted, and adapted to a harsh, unforgiving world. But in the end, they disappeared, leaving behind only fragments of bones and a bit of their DNA in our genes. Their story reminds us of how fragile the balance of life is, and how small changes can have an enormous impact on evolution. And now, thanks to modern science, we know that a part of them still lives inside us, even if it's a very small percentage. So the next time you look in the mirror and wonder where those facial features or that resistance to cold come from, think of the Neanderthals. Perhaps, after all, there's still a bit of prehistory inside you. Now I'm curious. What do you think? Were Neanderthals victims of fate, climate change, or did competition with our ancestors drive them to extinction? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on our next bizarre discoveries. Until next time, curious explorers, and remember, history is full of surprises. You just have to know where to look.